what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
All of us need to be reminded that the federal government did not create the states. The states created the federal government.
I was flipping through the controlled mainstream media cable channels, 200 channels and nothing good to watch, and came across the Biography channel, and a biography on the Rockefellers. And I was, of course, interested to see what they had to say. And the more you become aware of the controlled media, the more you become aware of the globalist intentions and their agenda, the clearer things become when you look at them. For example, this was a complete propaganda piece. I mean, obviously the Rockefellers are historically known for being robber barons. Literally, they sent Pinkerton guards to kill mine workers in Ludlow, the Ludlow massacre in 1914. They did many, many evil things. And this show only touches on a couple of them. And then shows all their philanthropy, all the things that they purchased, all the things that they gave to society. The Metropolitan Museum of Art, of course, Rockefeller Center. The United Nations isn't even touched upon, really. Gave us that, too. And they didn't touch upon the fact that the Rockefellers started the Council on Foreign Relations. And they didn't talk about that the Rockefeller interests funded I.G. Farben they were actually partners with I.G. Farben with the Nazis, nor did they mention that the Rockefeller Foundation also, which was founded in 1913, they didn't even make mention of the Rockefeller Foundation. Not even one word. Well, that's why, because if you looked at the records back in 1925 when the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Psychiatry and Eugenics study was founded, it says an awful lot. The Rockefellers were in with the Nazis. They started the Federal Reserve. Not once did they talk about the Federal Reserve or the banks. It's an interesting look at history.
The Rockefellers' rise had an unlikely heritage. John D's father, William Big Bill Rockefeller, was also in the oil business. Snake oil, that is.
William Rockefeller made a name for himself as an itinerant peddler. Today we call him a scam artist.
Calling himself a celebrated cancer specialist, Big Bill spent the 1830s and 40s roaming upstate New York, selling patent medicines and bogus cancer cures.
One of the potions he did sell to and would tell people would heal everything had crude oil in it.
He at least was successful enough to keep one step ahead of the law and one step ahead of angry purchasers of some of his elixirs.
Born in 1839, John D. Rockefeller was the second of Bill's 6 children with Eliza. Big Bill all but skipped out on the family shortly after the Rockefellers relocated to Cleveland in 1853. In 1863, Rockefeller and business partner Maurice Clark teamed up with chemist Samuel Andrews to start a small refinery.
His motto was that if I can get rid of a competitor, I'm going to get rid of him any way that I can.
In the spring of 1872, Rockefeller went on a buying spree, snapping up controlling interest in nearly 24 of Cleveland's small refineries, 6 of them in 2 days. Those who wouldn't sell, he simply bullied out of business. Renamed Standard Oil in 1870, Rockefeller's refining empire now reached well beyond Cleveland. By 1882, Standard controlled 90% of America's refining capacity. Rockefeller ruthlessly exploited his power, pressuring the railroads into a series of sweetheart deals that allowed Standard to haul oil at a fraction of the rate paid by its few remaining competitors. 2 years later, Rockefeller relocated the headquarters of his empire to New York City and moved his family into a $600,000 Manhattan townhouse. By 1885, Standard Oil had grown to become the world's largest and most profitable corporation. The Rockefeller family was well on its way to becoming the world's richest. And its most reviled. Editorial cartoons caricatured Rockefeller as an evil industrialist who manipulated the economy for his own gain. Labor activists, anarchists, and crusading politicians declared him a monster. In 1911, after almost a decade of appeals and arguments, the Supreme Court ordered Standard to divest itself of its subsidiaries within 6 months.
Virtually every major oil company functioning in the United States today came out of that decision to break up the Standard Trust.
In 1902, the family acquired a controlling interest in a mining firm called Colorado Iron and Fuel. In 1913, 9,000 miners walked off the job in a massive strike. On April 20th, 1914, the management sent Pinkerton agents and National Guardsmen to storm the strikers' camp outside Ludlow, Colorado. At least 24 miners died, including 2 women and 11 children, in what became known as the Ludlow Massacre. Assuming control of the family's philanthropy, Junior dramatically expanded on the institutions founded by his father.
Junior was a pioneer in founding the Urban League, the National Negro College Fund. The Rockefellers were always great champions of racial equality.
Junior also supported progressive causes, like the League of Nations. Abby gave money to found New York's Museum of Modern Art, while Junior spent millions restoring colonial Williamsburg. In addition to the family's image, the family patriarch got a makeover too. At the prompting of pioneering public relations director Ivy Lee, Sr. began handing out thousands of dimes to strangers. A favorite subject for photographs and newsreels, almost overnight, the simple gesture transformed the old man from a greedy monster to an eccentric grandfather figure.
At the very bottom of the Depression, when everything was wrong in New York City and elsewhere, when people just weren't working at all, my grandfather put 75,000 people who theretofore had been out of work to work.
And he paid them out of his own pocket. As construction neared completion, Junior made another bold decision. Much like his father had bet on the emerging oil industry, Junior believed that mass communication was the wave of the future.
The key to the Rockefeller Center deal after the Metropolitan Opera left was creating an alliance first with General Electric and then RCA, the old Radio Corporation of America, with the dog listening to the phonograph. If you look at television in the morning, you still see the Today Show coming from Rockefeller Center.
Junior's gamble paid off. By 1938, Rockefeller Center was turning a profit. Rockefeller gave generously to education, funding institutions such as the University of Chicago, founded in 1890 with Rockefeller money. In Atlanta, Rockefeller founded a school for African American women named Spelman College after Rockefeller's abolitionist in-laws. His generosity, however, did little to improve Rockefeller's image. The press portrayed his philanthropy as a calculated attempt to purchase popularity. In 1959, construction began on Lincoln Center, the world's largest performing arts complex. It was the brainchild of Junior's eldest son, John D. Rockefeller III. And while John was busy building his art center uptown, youngest brother David Rockefeller was launching a massive urban renewal project downtown.
There was real concern by the late 1950s that Lower Manhattan in particular was failing to keep pace. David Rockefeller came up with the World Trade Center.
The World Trade Center may have been David's idea, but it was Governor Nelson Rockefeller who got things off the ground. 2 years before the '76 elections, conventional wisdom was that the Republican nomination was his for the taking. Then came Watergate. Richard Nixon resigned in disgrace. Gerald Ford was elevated to the presidency. And Nelson, in late 1974, begrudgingly accepted appointment as vice president. In 1979, the 70-year-old Rockefeller suffered a heart attack, reportedly while having sex with a 27-year-old staff member.
Well, at least he went out with a bang. The Rockefeller Foundation is the prime sponsor for the United Nations Drastic Depopulation Program. Evidence in the possession of a growing number of researchers in America, England, and Germany demonstrates that the Foundation and its corporate, medical, and political associates organized the racial mass murder program of Nazi Germany. These so-called philanthropists. These globalists, who functioned as a conduit for British Empire geopolitics, were not stopped after World War II. This United Nations alliance of the old Nazi right with the new left poses an even graver danger to the world than it did in 1941. Up until 1937, IG Farben was run by the Warburg family. Of course, the Federal Reserve Warburg family started the Federal Reserve, and the whole push towards world government started with the creation of the Federal Reserve System even before that, but the real push was the criminal empire known as the Federal Reserve. These people are evil. They're just absolutely not who they appear to be. In the 50s, the Rockefellers reorganized the U.S. eugenics movement in their own family offices with spin-off population control and abortion groups. The Eugenics Society changed its name to the Society for the Study of Social Biology, which is its current name. Dr. Kalman helped save Verschoor by testifying at his denazification proceedings. Listen to that, denazification. Unbelievable. Dr. Kalman created the American Society of Human Genetics, which organized the Human Genome Project, a current $3 billion physical multiculturalism effort. Kalman was the director of the American Eugenics Society in 1952 and from 54 to 65. The Rockefeller Foundation has long financed the eugenics movement in England, apparently repaying Britain for the fact that British capital and Englishman partner had actually started John Rockefeller out in his oil trust, which is true. He provided the financing. And in the 1960s, the Eugenics Society of England adopted what they called crypto-eugenics, stating that their official reports that they would do eugenics through means of instruments not labeled as eugenics. So that's the whole point. What they're telling us is something else. It's not eugenics, but it is eugenics. There's no war in Eurasia. There's always been war in Eurasia. With support from the Rockefellers, the Eugenics Society in England set up a subcommittee called the International Planned Parenthood Federation. I'm sure everyone's aware of that organization, which for 12 years had no other address than the Eugenics Society. This, then, is the private international apparatus which has set up the world for a global Holocaust under the UN flag.